Hey there, Bidwell. Chef Anthony here again, and I'm going to show you how to break down some roundfish. All right, we have some beautiful silk pargo or silk snapper here to demonstrate on how to break down a roundfish. You can see that it is, while not perfectly round, it does have more of a round shape to it whenever you look at it. Some of the big things you can tell that this is a roundfish, not a flatfish, is that it has eyes on either side of its head, opposed to the flatfish that have both eyes on one side of the head. Prior to breaking these down, I want to talk to you about how to make sure that these are nice and fresh. Some things that we like to do that you can do from seeing this video, you can touch the flesh. Whenever there's some nice springing back to it, you can tell that that skin and meat is nice and fresh. We go and we look at the gills. We have some nice red gills here, opposed to brown. You don't want to have any brown gills. And then last for our visuals is we have our eyes here. The eyes, while they are tinged red, they are nice and clear. What is concerning is if the eyes have more of a cataracts or a glazed over fogginess to them, that is what you're concerned about, not necessarily the tinge of red there. Addition to the gills, you can look at the tongue as well to see if you have a nice tongue there, because that will start to go as well. These silk snappers, they have already been gutted prior to us receiving them, and this is something that will do really nicely to help preserve the life of the fish. If you get something that still has the guts inside, like our flatfish that we're going to do, those will have a shorter shelf life because of that. And last but not least, you can't do this on there, but there's always the sniff test. You want to have a fish will smell like fish, but not fishy like as in bad, but fish as in the ocean. It is a clean smelling opposed to a disgusting smell of fish. So if you smell it and it is a strong, almost rancidy fish smell, then that is probably a bad fish for you. But if it smells clean and like the ocean, then that is a good fish. So these two silk snappers that we have, they are both excellent fish. And here's how we break them down. All right, some of the tools I like to have on hand and ready to go and accessible to me while I break down fish. I like to have boning knives. I have two different boning knives here. One's a little bit more sturdy and the other one's more flexible. The flexible one is good for really good for the flatfish. I have tweezers for pin bones. We'll go over that. And then I really like to have my my carving knife there, because that is something that makes skinning the fish much easier if you plan on skinning your fish. I always have my honer, and I have a pair of shears there that if I have to cut through any bones, maybe I want to serve this as a whole fish, I would still cut the fins off so that they roast easier and it's just the meat there that we would want to do. Additionally, not present here is a scaler. And that's because I can use a knife to scale, but with the fish that I'm going to do today, I'm going to be removing the skin, so I'm not going to worry about scaling the fish. Last but not least, my two last things that I have here are gloves. I always use gloves whenever I'm cleaning fish, and then towels. I have lots of towels off camera, but I also have a wet towel right here. And that's very important because, as I said, I'm going to leave the scales on the fish because I'm going to skin it. But every time I cut my fish and I want to put my knife back in there, I always will wipe it on a damp towel to make sure that my knife is completely free of scales as I go to cut the fish again, because I want to make sure that my fillet doesn't have any scales there. That is something that will not taste good should those accidentally get to the diner. All right, we have our roundfish here. We're going to go and we have our nice fillets on either side. First thing we're going to do is we're going to cut off this side of the fillet. I like having the back of the fish or the top of the fish facing me. I find it's easier to go about that way. But I'm going to cut right where you feel the collar here. It's quite firm. And then it goes soft. And where that turns soft, that is where the fillet starts. That takes a little bit of force to kind of break that skin there, or it can. But once I get down there, I am only trying to cut down to the spinal column. And I'll just area loose there. So I have my fish cut halfway through, and part of what gives me trouble there is part of the collar, and then also part of the pin bones that will go down the side of your fish. But now I am cut halfway through the fish. As you can see, I didn't quite go 50% of the way. It's probably about 48% of the way. And now that I'm in, I will take my knife and I will turn direction to go towards the tail, and I'm just looking to cut this fillet off. Now, where it gives me some trouble early on is I'm running parallel to the spine, but the first few pin bones are very strong. And you can see I've cut through those first few pin bones, and I have a firm but gentle grasp on my fillet, and I'm having my knife go flat along the back of the fish, and it's kind of guiding me down. I know that my arm's in the way here for the camera, so. And I just go from top down to tail, and you have one of the sides off. Now, one thing, anytime that you store fish, we did not scale this fish, but anytime that you store fish that still has its skin on and might have been scaled, you always want to store flesh side to flesh side and skin side to skin side. You never want to go skin to flesh whenever you can help it. I'm going to take my fish, and I like using this technique where I'm going to cut this first, and then I'm going to take this to the edge of my board, because I've cut back to that spine, but you will see the fish is kind of recessed now because it does not have one side of protein. So I like to take it to the edge of my cutting board, and that will make my fillet lay nice and flat again. And like I said, I've cut in. Now I turn my knife, and those first few pin bones are always the most difficult. And I am being firm but gentle as I'm cutting through those first few. And I'm also making sure not to saw through my fillet. And I keep my blade angled flat, and if anything, very slightly down. And that's going to ensure that I don't ride up into the meat of the fillet. So we have our second beautiful fillet here. Took a little bit of the tail with that, that's no problem. I can just cut that off, or I could leave that on to assist with the skinning of the fish that I will do shortly. But once again, very important, we have our fillet, and that is flesh to flesh and skin to skin. Take this time to see, I have my filleted fish here. I did pretty good. There's still a tiny bit of meat on there, and we want to make as much money from this fish as we can. So I'm going to take my kitchen spoon, and you can actually go and scrape any residual meat off of here. And now you can see there isn't a lot, but there is some. And if you're doing quite a few fish, you take all these, maybe you smoke it, make smoked fish dip, maybe you turn it into ceviche, or you can put it into like seafood cakes. But you will have some nice, you want to make as much money off this as you can, because whenever you do whole fish, you do have the loss of weight of the bones and everything there. So even whenever you buy a 2 to 3 pound fish like what this is, you're only getting about 2 6 to 8 ounce usable fillets. And you get a significant amount of loss there. But as you can see now, it is almost see-through where we scrape the meat. And you can save this, you can put this into fish stock, or another thing you can do is maybe you don't want to save all of it. Sometimes I will just tear off the head there. I'll save the head for my fish stock, and I will get rid of this, or I will just break these up to save space for my fish stock. All right, we did not scale these fish because I said we were going to take the skin off. So now I'm going to demonstrate how to skin your fish. Now I know that there's a lot of scales on here, so I'm going to be very careful when touching them, because I don't want to get, I want to leave as many scales from touching the meat of the fish as I can. The first thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to cut away this belly portion that came with removing the fillet. And then I like to use my carver for this because it is a very nice long flat blade, and the flat blade is what's most important to remove this skin. So I like to start at the tail here, and I cut towards the end of the tail first, just till I get to the bottom of the meat, and then I switch the directions of my knife to go towards where the head would be on the fish. And you can do a little bit of sawing, especially early on, but then you want to pull the skin tight and kind of drag the blade from one end to the other, and that's going to give you a very nicely skinned fish with no problem, no meat left on there, and you have a fantastic fillet here. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. And the last thing that we have to do with this fillet, prior to saying that it's good to sell, is there's still some of those pin bones that we cut through whenever we were removing the fillet. So those will be centralized along this bloodline on both sides there. They go right through the center of the fillet. So what we want to do there is we want to remove those. They only go about halfway down the fillet. So we just feel for where they end, then we'll cut to there around either side, giving adequate room, and then we just remove that piece. Now we have a very nice bone-free fillet. This is a generous portion, I would say a generous portion for dinner, or you cut this in half, I'd go right there, and you have two nice lunch portions. And even though I've removed the skin on this, I still like to go skin to skin and flesh to flesh. We're going to do the exact same thing with this other fillet. With removing this little bit of belly section. And we'll do a little bit more there. And then once again, I'm right-handed, so I like going left to right whenever I can on this. But I take my tail, I cut in a little bit, switch directions, saw a little bit to get it started, and then I will just kind of saw very gently as I pull that flesh. So again, nice beautiful fillet, just our skin and scales. Pitch that, save that, do with that as you will. And then we take our cleaned knife, feel for those pin bones. Once again, they stop right about here, so I go a little bit further. Just because I personally would rather lose a little bit of fish than accidentally get a customer with a pin bone. It's not worth the aggravation. Let me cut that out. Trash that. And another beautiful fillet.